In the brutal mathematics of modern warfare, Ukraine faced an impossible equation from day one, trying to defeat a military force nearly 10 times larger with dramatically fewer resources, equipment, and personnel. That's why Ukraine had to step up in the technology department and develop several drone squads that would become pivotal for maintaining the so-called drone line, a line going just behind the front line to create the final stand where Russian forces wouldn't be able to cross without significant damage or complete destruction. And that's where the 427th Regiment RAR Rogue has emerged as one of the top performing Ukrainian drone squads. With a no-mercy Firestorm approach, RAR Rogue has been unleashed on the Russian invaders to rain doom from above. Now, behind the existence of RAR Rogue, or RAR Rogue, lies Ukraine's ability to improvise, adapt, and overcome insurmountable odds, and the sheer desperation, ingenuity, and stubbornness of its soldiers to see the war to its end. And according to RAR Rogue, that end won't happen with a ceasefire. So here's a closer look at what makes one of Ukraine's deadliest drone squads tick, and how the war got to this point. Ukraine's journey from drone warfare novice to a global leader began not in military laboratories but in civilian garages, hobby shops and volunteer workshops across the country. At the start of the war, Ukraine possessed 7 relatively small domestic drone manufacturers and virtually no military drone doctrine. One of the successful FPV combat strikes was documented all the way back in July 2022. The military used a modified racing quadcopter jury-rigged with explosives to launch it into Russian positions. At that point, there weren't even dedicated drone squads, with the group Signum, which made the video, being composed primarily of volunteers. This crude but effective beginning established the template Ukraine would scale to industrial levels. The RAROG Battalion's formation in April 2023, among 4 other drone squads that operated across the front line, showed that Ukraine recognized drone warfare as not just a tactical necessity, but one of the few ways to overturn a marked numerical disadvantage. Beginning with civilian DJI Mavic quadcopters modified to drop improvised explosives, mainly hand grenades cable tied to the drone's small body, Ukrainian operators rapidly advanced to purpose-built FPV platforms carrying sophisticated ordnance. The transition from dropping grenades to carrying RPG-7 warheads, RKJ-3 anti-tank grenades, and custom-manufactured charges reflected Ukraine's systematic approach to weaponizing civilian technology. But even then, the actual techniques didn't change much. The source of the ordnance was one of 3 distinct options. 1. Ukraine had a steady supply of Soviet-era weaponry, as it was technically one of the most advanced militaristic nations by the time the Soviet Union collapsed, inheriting the second largest portion of the Soviet arsenal. This included anti-tank mines and grenades, with the former being described as arriving to frontline drone manufacturers by the truckful. Second, while Russia has been able to slowly but surely advance into Ukrainian territory, that doesn't mean the front line never moved back. A successful Ukrainian counter-offensive meant a break in the Russian offense, which potentially allowed Ukrainian forces to take some of Russia's supplies alongside the prisoners. And third, NATO donations were disproportionately made from the same type of equipment Ukraine already fielded, including ordnance, missiles, and bombs. And regardless of the source, Ukraine made any suitable military supplies received fit their drones. In a video interview with United 24, Ukraine's government-run platform and news outlet, soldiers in RAR Rogue were shown manually sawing through bombshells to extract the explosive payload to be mounted on the drone. The reason for using manual methods rather than a mechanized extraction was relatively simple. Drills or grinders can throw sparks against the metal of the shell, which can be enough to trigger the volatile explosive and prematurely detonate the bomb, killing the soldier. So, Ukrainian drone squad soldiers are literally playing with their very lives whenever they need to modify a bomb and prep a drone for a strike. But the risk can be very well worth it. Among the 5 dedicated drone squads, RAROG has been consistently showcased in Ukrainian social media posts through their FPV drone attacks on Russia's equipment and personnel, showing just how important and effective drone attacks can be in modern warfare. In fact, the success of these drone squads is one of the main reasons why Ukraine's drone industry has practically exploded with innovation and production capacity. Now, at the start of 2024, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense suggested that domestic production was around 20,000 drones monthly. By early 2025, that number jumped to over 200,000, representing a tenfold increase driven by battlefield necessity. Furthermore, the country went from having only 7 suppliers to a distributed network of over 500, with a variety of government-funded companies and volunteer operations creating makeshift drones for immediate use. The entire network of drone producers is supported by the government through the Delta system, an innovative information gathering and processing system that collates data across branches and units in the military. Delta allows RAROG to communicate and collaborate with other drone squads to achieve maximum frontline coverage and provide increased surveillance and short-range aerial strike capabilities. But even without these tools, RAROG is a force to be reckoned with on its own. RAROG is one of the 5 drone squads to be included in the recently announced and highly secretive $110+ million drone line project. The promotion reflects the unit's exceptional battlefield performance, which has been documented on social media and short-form videos published by Ukraine's armed forces. Even based on a limited overview of RAROG's successes, there are plenty of vital targets that the squad has been shown hitting. The chief among these is the T-90M, which is supposedly the most modern and defensible Russian main battle tank that's in active production. RAROG heavily damaged the tank by ramming 2 drones into it, with the first disabling the vehicle and the second preventing the operators from evacuating. But perhaps the most newsworthy reports surrounding RAROG involve it taking out Soviet-era tanks like the T-62. These tanks were covered with a protective mesh that was designed to entangle the drone before it could hit the chassis. RAROG responded by sending multiple drones at a single tank, which was still highly cost and material effective. These tanks were the first sign of drones being able to cheaply and effectively destroy older Russian tanks, which were only deployed because they were less expensive to maintain and repair. The same news report that covered the destruction of T-62s mentioned that the squad managed to achieve records with 4 tanks and 3 BMP-2 infantry support vehicles in a single day. Another report included a destruction of a BPM-97 Vistral armored vehicle, which was documented only 5 times throughout 40 months of war. The BPM-97 is reportedly suffering from significant production issues, and its presence on the front was another indicator of Russia throwing everything but the kitchen sink at Ukraine. Drones are also capable of destroying Russia's own drone forces. By carrying sticks, branches, or even nets, a drone can approach an enemy from above and disable it or push it off course with its added range and mass. Now, beyond that, RAROG has also posted videos of its drones flying directly into Russian soldiers in the open field or forest surrounding the front line. The harrowing images show soldiers attempting to shoot, run away, or even desperately swat at an incoming drone. Mere feet before the soldier, the signal with the drone gets lost, suggesting that its explosive payload was detonated. The amount of shrapnel expelled through that practically pulverizes the human body, even through standard protective layers, all but ensuring a quick yet messy death. If an attack is conducted against a group, the survival rate increases with distance. Even then, 1 or 2 drones are likely enough to wreak havoc in a traditional Russian formation on or near the front line. This ruthlessness in killing soldiers is not unique to RAROG drone operators, but it's one of the main ways Ukraine has been able to reduce the number of its own troop casualties throughout the conflict. While the statistics suggest that Russia has lost upward of 1 million soldiers, including both deaths and wounded, the scales and percentages involved work in Russia's favor, at least on the surface. After all, Russia has an estimated 140 million people. On the other hand, an optimistic estimate of Ukraine's population is around 40 million people, while more conservative and realistic estimates that include the rapid rate of emigration drop that number to between 25 and 30 million. And Ukraine's casualty has been kept a secret, for good reason, but it's been estimated to be around 500,000 people in the least. As such, Ukraine sees drones as a rational way to reduce the country's overall losses. RAROG's success at removing key military targets and cleaving through entire battalions likely fully emboldens that idea. With this in mind, it's worth examining the kind of weapons and equipment RAROG has at its disposal for its short-range drone missions. What makes RAROG so terrifying for Russia is the fact that the battalion isn't relying on just one type of drone. Instead, it's being given access to Ukraine's entire arsenal, spanning multiple generations of killing machines. Think of it like a deadly toolbox where each tool is designed to solve a specific Russian problem. Their bread and butter are the modified commercial racing quadcopters mentioned earlier. But getting specific about what modified actually means, RAROG takes 7-inch and 10-inch racing drones, the same kind teenagers use for competitions and photographers use for aerial shots, then turns them into flying bombs. The larger platforms can carry up to 11 pounds of explosives or a small mine. That's enough weight for an RPG-7 PG-7VL warhead, which can punch through a feet and a half of armor. But here's where Ukrainian ingenuity really shines. The RKG-3 anti-tank grenades. These wine bottle-sized death dealers were originally designed in 1950 for soldiers to literally throw at enemy tanks. Back in the day, it was tantamount to a suicide mission. Ukrainian engineers took these Soviet relics, added some 3D printed tail fins, and suddenly transformed hand grenades into precision-guided anti-tank munitions. Strap them onto a drone, and they become a fairly aerodynamic, fast-moving aerial deployment method that can literally drop down on tanks. Then there are the Ukrainian-produced Pegasus series drones from Pegasus. Flying at 30 to 50 miles per hour with a 13-mile operational range, they're specifically designed to carry anti-tank warheads that can penetrate Russian armor. But Ukraine didn't stop there, taking any help from NATO allies it could get. For example, Lithuania stepped up with Shapak drones that are absolute monsters, 11-pound payload capacity, 93 miles per hour at top speed, and thermal imaging systems that let RAROG operators hunt Russians in the dead of night. The precision these operators achieve is honestly terrifying for anyone on the receiving end. There are documented strikes where drones fly through windows and directly into open tank hatches. That's sniper-level accuracy at drone speeds, while the operator sits kilometers away in relative safety. But to really see what nightmares are made of, the Vampire series hexacopters deserve attention. Russian soldiers have nicknamed these Baba Yaga after the witch from Slavic folklore, and the name really fits. These 6-rotor beasts can carry up to 30 pounds of explosives 20 miles away from the operator. At that weight and range, the Baba Yaga can technically compete with a traditional howitzer, all the while being much more difficult to pinpoint and trace back to the operator. And just when Russia developed a countermeasure by trying to use signal jammers, Ukraine used Russia's own developments against them. Newer drones rely on laying down fiber optic cables as they fly. The analog communication system completely bypasses traditional jamming techniques, while also potentially improving image quality and reducing transmission delay. It's one of the ways Ukraine has managed to close the gap and surpass Russia's FPV drone capabilities. Now, the sheer range of drones available points to the unbelievable innovation and iteration speed that Ukraine has managed to keep up for the past 3 years. According to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, they approved 70 new types of drone munitions in 2024 alone. That's more than one new weapon type every week. Compare that to traditional military procurement, where it takes years to approve a new round of ammunition. The same can be applied to the production volumes. As mentioned earlier, Ukraine was producing 200,000 FPV drones every month at the start of 2025. That's more drones than most countries have produced in their entire history. Then, Ukraine came out with estimates that it can procure a total of 4.5 million drones in 2025, with over 90% of it solely from domestic production. This massive production enables Ukraine to deploy roughly 15 FPV drones per mile of frontline every single day, estimating the current frontline as being 800 miles long. But there's one particular number that matters before all others: price. A $500 to $2,000 FPV drone equipped with a $200 RPG warhead can destroy a Russian T-90M tank worth $4.5 million. That's a cost exchange ratio of over 5,000 to 1 in Ukraine's favor. Even if RAROG loses 4 drones for every successful hit, and their actual success rates are between 20 to 40% by the way, they're still winning the economic war by a solid margin. And individual FPV drone success rates might seem low at 20 to 40% accuracy, but when Ukraine is producing 200,000 drones a month, those failures become a numbers game. Furthermore, each failed drone still forces Russian forces to take cover, disrupt their operations, and create psychological pressure. Even worse, those are the old drones. Some of Ukraine's standout drone developers have already started deploying artificial intelligence in select drone configurations. By early estimates, the accuracy of AI-supported drone operations skyrocketed to 70 or 80%. Where Ukraine needed 5 drones to strike a target, it now needs the same amount of drone to strike 3 or 4 of them. The economic warfare capabilities are threatening to escalate from there as AI becomes more powerful and cost-effective to implement via pinprick-sized chips in existing models. While initial reports suggest small numbers, at only 10,000 AI drones compared to the 4.5 million figure for total procurement, it's highly likely that continued testing will lead to increased adoption, which only reduces costs. After all, the AI system technically needs to be trained to distinguish enemy positions from friendly operators and equipment. Thanks to the extensive media and surveillance coverage throughout the war, especially due to the prevalence of the same FPV drones that are being fitted with AI, Ukraine has millions of hours of video footage on Russian military movements and strategies that AI can extract patterns from. For example, the Seika Scout can distinguish between 64 different targets and prioritize them completely autonomously. RAROG and other drone squads are even more encouraged to improve those accuracy figures thanks to Ukraine's innovative Gamification system. Well, the system itself isn't anything new, but the way it's been implemented is, when a squad gets points for hitting targets, such as 6 points for a soldier, or up to 50 points for a mobile rocket launcher, individual drone designs and operators could perfect their operations to focus on a single type of target to maximize their gains. Then, those points are used to purchase more drones and further increase the battalion's overall deadliness. RAROG has had documented kills on all major target types, and high-performing units like Magyar's birds have accumulated over 16,000 points, allowing it to specialize by purchasing hundreds of anti-tank drones through the procurement program. And these 2 battalions don't operate in isolation. On June 11, 2024, Ukraine did something no country had ever done before. They created the world's first military branch dedicated entirely to unmanned systems. The new Unmanned Systems Forces, or USF, have about 5,000 personnel organized into these specialized regiments and battalions. Even the Drone Line project, which is an initiative that sounds like something out of science fiction, only contains 5 battalions: RAROG, the legendary Magyar's birds, the Achilles Regiment, K2 and Phoenix. Together, they're trying to create what Ukraine calls integrated kill zones across the entire 800-mile front. The basic concept for the drone line is to create overlapping areas where Russians can't move without facing immediate drone attack. Each unit operates in different sectors but shares intelligence, techniques, and coordinated targeting through the Delta system. It's like having a real-time strategy game where 5 expert players are controlling different parts of the map but sharing information instantly. The drone line covers an area immediately surrounding the actual front, meaning that it receives advance notice on soldiers moving toward Ukrainian positions as well as those trying to retreat. And when a lone soldier gets spotted, it takes only 1 small drone to hunt them down. And the drone line and its complementary units are just the front-facing side of the operation, in this case literally. Behind the scenes, the Delta system maintains direct communication with Ukraine's domestic drone manufacturers and even foreign volunteer groups. When an operator identifies a problem or needs a new capability, they're talking directly to the engineers who can build it. There's no bureaucracy, no committees, no years-long procurement processes. As soon as something needs to be changed, it gets theorized, then put to the test in actual combat situations. The US military-industrial complex can only attempt to replicate Russia and China's military capabilities. The Ukrainian soldiers are living and surviving through them. RAROG's success represents something much bigger than just another military unit. It's Ukraine's solution to an impossible strategic problem. Facing an enemy with overwhelming numerical superiority doesn't allow for victory by playing by that enemy's rules. Victory comes from changing the rules entirely. And that concept isn't isolated to the war in Ukraine. Consider the rising role that China plays in global geopolitics. The People's Liberation Army has at least 2 million active members. This is 6 times what Russia sent to the front line to invade Ukraine 3 years ago. By contrast, the US has an army half the size in pure numbers, and the rest of NATO isn't even close to matching those numbers. The US Marines have already started losing much of their heavy machinery, replacing them with long-range strike capabilities and drone operations. If the war in Ukraine is anything to go by, a potential conflict in the Indo-Pacific might be organized around drones hopping between islands in the East and South China Seas, threatening Chinese advances while the US Navy creates an insurmountable defense of its allies in the region. Ukrainian soldiers in the RAR Rogue units don't think that the war in Ukraine will end soon, and they're prepared to fight for every inch of Ukrainian soil through sheer drone supremacy. Given how Putin has rejected attempts at diplomacy and the US gracelessly pulled out of any peace agreement discussions and turned its attention to the Middle East, it's up to Ukraine and its European allies and donors to lead the charge as drones redraw the front lines in debris and blood. Now, if you want to find out more about the other notable Ukrainian drone battalion, the Magyar's Birds, click on the link in the video. Or, to get caught up on the most recent developments in the war in Ukraine and global geopolitics, subscribe to the Military Show for daily news.